Yeah, Dave would have loved this song just as much as I do. Our little house would be shaking. Dave had a lot of interests, especially music. Like he loved music. I think a song was always playing in his head, and during our long goodbye, he searched YouTube for a song or a talk that would resonate with our feelings and thoughts at the time. Have you heard of the long goodbye? The Urban Dictionary says it's typically used to describe the last encounter between two friends or two lovers or family members before a long leave of absence, and in most cases, permanent. The literal saying of goodbyes doesn't necessarily have to be drawn out. Long only clarifies the fact that the people involved won't see each other again for a long time, if ever. So, Dave and I, we had a short 28-year hello and a very long 5 month goodbye. We always talked about everything. Nothing was ever off limits. And I know now, and I realize now how lucky I was to have all that time with him. I still don't understand fully why we had to have the long goodbye, but grateful for the whole time we did spend together. Even during the long goodbye, I learned new things about him. He always had a very deep thoughts and that he could express easily, and during that long goodbye, those thoughts flowed even more, and I listened even more. And the way I look at it now is that I gave him the gift of listening. He gave me the gift of watching strength, honesty, truth, reality, compassion, and empathy all through his struggles. Human energy is a fascinating thing to observe in another. Dave did have a lack of energy leading up to his illness. A couple of years of minor complaints like shoulder pain, he was tired, no energy, digestion upsets. Those little things would come and go, and we didn't worry that much about them. We would adjust our diet and think about ways to maybe work less and have less stress. But he didn't really want to go anywhere during that time. Everything was kind of a big effort, but he powered on right up until the fall of 2019. And that's when one of the moles that he had throughout his lifetime, it turned really quickly. And what we normally did for them, it didn't work that time. Melanoma, it's the fastest growing cancer. It spreads quickly and relentlessly. In October, he was diagnosed with stage 5 melanoma cancer, sent to Sudbury Hospital for treatment options, and he qualified for an experimental immunology therapy drug that had only been available for about a year or so with no real data. We just had to trust it was the right thing at the time. And it was. It did stop the movement of the cancer. He started to feel better. We started going out. He started to plow the driveway. He got back involved in our business and started ramping it all up again. It was, kind of a positive time that winter through January, February, but we also knew we were in the long goodbye at that point. We had lots of hope that the drugs, the medication would give him at least 5 more years, and that's always the time frame that the doctors give. Oh yeah, you'll get up to 5 years. So Dave was in the hospital for less than a week the first time in October, and then we were home. Talk about a whole other world. Dave was sent home after a week of radiation treatments and a whirlwind of doctors telling us what was going on in his body. He was sent home with about 15 different prescriptions that I had to figure out. Take with food, take in the morning, take at night, take two, take when needed, but for what though? So I set up a hospital bed. I actually got a hospital bed, set it up in the dining room, transformed the house right into a little mini hospital. And I slept on the couch beside him. The first few nights that he was home, they were terrible. Dave would wake up screaming, and then he would need to talk like till he could go back to sleep. He would tell me in detail about his nightmares, and they would involve him passing on and fighting to get to his rightful place, and he was scared. He didn't understand why he had to fight to get there. We quickly realized it was probably the pain pills that were giving him these traumatic nightmares, and we switched him over to THC gummies so he could sleep at night, and actually they did work. So we spent so much time that winter, 2019, 2020, to talk and laugh and cry and have fun. And I would pretend to looking after the driveway was nothing for me. And we would just be with each other as we always had been for the past almost 30 years. We learned a lot about the healthcare system. In Northern Ontario, they use telehealth a lot. Dave's oncologist was in Sudbury, but we only had to go over to the local clinic in town and talk to the doctors there via set up Zoom call with the support of the nurses and the doctor there. We also had the VON, the traveling nurses, come in to the home. At first, it was every day and then once or twice a week. They would take Dave's vitals, check in on him, assess him, the meds, the environment, and talk to me. And from the very first nurse visit, Dave befriended each one that would come in. So once we got over the initial shock of it all, settled into the routine of getting better, accepted the need for the nurses' visits and the medication, there were all kinds of days of future talks, discovering new songs, business ideas, house plans, travel plans, family. Nothing was off limits. And, but in early January, I would see the Chinese videos coming in about people just keeling over in the street due to this mystery virus of some kind. And then, a couple weeks went by, and then there were some announcements about a pandemic, and the world started shutting down. The nurses actually stopped coming. And the same day the pandemic was announced, and I guess we're in March now, was the day that Dave's medication gave him a side effect that we just couldn't ignore. His fever spiked up to like 105, 106. Calling the doctors, they said, stop immediately the medication. So we had to. And they said, until the fever comes down and, give us a couple of days, we'll reassess it. But within 2 days, he could barely lift his head up. He could barely speak, and he was still at home. I called the ambulance, and he left our house for the very last time. The cancer had immediately, within hours, it seemed, of not taking the medication, spread to his brain. And by the time he got to the hospital and got to Sudbury, the doctors and got the MRI and CAT scan and everything, the doctors said that they had never seen so many tumors in a brain. It was beyond anything, except they wanted to try radiation one more time. That was the only thing that they could offer. So they did, and it did nothing. I was immediately called and said, you got to come. He was put right into palliative care at that point. And I'll never forget that. We were in his room in the hospital, just me. He was out of it, unable to talk. And his team of doctors and nurses came in. There was about 8 of them, very solemn, very official looking. One of them started to carefully explain to me what was happening to him and that he was not going to recover. And if they took him off the machines that they had him hooked up to, that was helping keeping his heart going, that he might actually go right away or he might stay for a little bit, but that this was it. And when I gave them permission and said yes, they actually immediately got up and shut off the machine. I wasn't expecting that. And there was quiet in the room as we all watched what would happen. And he kept breathing very slowly, but he stayed. And after a few minutes, they watched, and then they all started leaving and immediately made plans, and they moved him into another room. This room was very small. Paint was peeling, the floor was kind of dirty looking, and there was just one very uncomfortable chair for me to try to sit in and try to sleep in. So I sat there and stared at him. I watched him breathing very, very slowly and very, very loudly in and out. And I tried not to look too closely at the room and just tried to just concentrate on him. The nurses, they would come in frequently, day and night, and one of them asked me if I wanted him to have a sponge bath. Well, I wasn't sure. I just didn't know. She explained and said, like, it will help him. It'll help him move on quicker. I had to think about that, and pretty much right away I said, yeah, let's do it. I knew he would want that. And as we were bathing him and they let me help, I noticed when we put this sponge in, it was soaked in mouthwash, it was supposed to freshen up his mouth. He clamped down on it and he wouldn't let us take it out. I talked to him. I'm like, open your mouth. Come on, you have to open your mouth. And then I realized he was thirsty. He needed water. So I got a new sponge and just water and I helped him. I saw immediately, put the new sponge in and it was just water and his body relaxed, the tension was gone, and he was accepting of our care. And the nurses were so really gentle with them as they turned him over and back again. And they were really great with me too. But it was such a weird time. They were all very nervous about the mystery virus at the same time. They would hold meetings, and I caught one of them outside in the hallway. Tried to listen, but I couldn't really hear too much. But they were obviously very nervous trying to make plans. No visitors were allowed except if somebody was in palliative care. So I was really one of the only visitors that were allowed into the hospital, and I had to go through a lot of protocols to get in. I had to sit at the end of this one big, huge, long table at the entrance to the hospital, and there was one person way down at the other end, completely masked up, head to foot. I could barely hear what they were saying, but they were asking me questions. Had I traveled? Had I been around anyone sick? Why was I there? And then they had to make me wait to ensure I was allowed in. It was a huge process. So I basically just stayed in the hospital, even though I had a hotel room. I just stayed in the hospital with Dave, just in that uncomfortable chair in that uncomfortable room, and I just sat and watched him and thought about our life together. I was in shock. I even knew it at the time that I was. I couldn't believe here we were. So Friday night comes, and a very nice nurse came in to talk with me. She said she had worked in palliative care for years and that I really looked like I needed to get some sleep. I needed to keep my health up, she explained, and I agreed. She encouraged me to go to the hotel and that she would check in on Dave every 15 minutes throughout the whole night. They'd leave the door open, and people would be checking on him. If there was any change at all, she and others knew what to look for. She'd call me immediately, and I could be there in 10 minutes. It was just across the street. So I agreed. I did go, and I did sleep. Not surprisingly, because I hadn't slept in 3 or 4 days. I didn't get a call from her that night. And I did wake up just as early as I always did. Got dressed immediately and was back there by 6:30. She actually met me outside his room and said, "Oh, good. I was just going to call you. There has been a change. It's just a slight change, but I think you should be here." So I went in and she left me, and I sat there once again and just watched him. He was still breathing in and out, and it was much slower. I'd be counting the times in between the breaths, thinking, wow, this is so slow. I couldn't believe it. And it was so loud. And I would sit there and watch him. I looked out the dirty window, and all of a sudden there was this most beautiful sunrise. It was gorgeous. Oranges, pinks, yellows. The sky was completely colored over. I leaned over and I whispered into Dave's ear, "Dave, there's a beautiful sunrise out there. It's okay to let go, and I love you very much." And within seconds of me saying that, the next breath, it didn't come. And I watched him very closely. And it still didn't come. And I'm watching, and I could hear two nurses coming in. And it's like they knew. I said, "He's not breathing," while I was still staring at him, just waiting for that next breath to come. So the head nurse, she came over, checked all of his vitals, looked at everything, and pronounced him. I said, "No, no, that can't be right. Can you please check again?" And without a word, she did. But then had to tell me, yeah, yeah, it's true. He was gone. I looked up, and the sunrise was still brilliant. And I thought also I might be able to see him rise up. I might I might see him just one more time. And I think I did, or at least I so wanted to that I did. He had such a loving send off, and I'm so glad I was there. And I'm so glad there was a lovely sunrise and wonderful people around. And that's why I know he's waiting for me somewhere in a perpetual sunrise that he can't wait to show me.